Hello everybody, so this video is entitled Zeta versus Klaviyo, Neo Marketing, who wins the Neo Marketing race. And of course, this video was actually suggested multiple times in my comment section, and many of you do that, and I usually don't cover them unless they look cheap in my spreadsheet. And Klaviyo looks quite cheap in my spreadsheet, which is the reason why I took a look at it, I'm covering it, and I'm telling you what I think about it. But first of all, the comparison to Klaviyo in my view is Zeta. Zeta is the most obvious comparison to Klaviyo. Klaviyo focuses mostly on B2C, mostly on smaller businesses. It also has a more narrow focus, and it is closer to a CRM in many ways, which I think is why the market has kind of linked Klaviyo to the SaaS apocalypse and, linked it with stocks like CRM, even though they do something slightly different. And I put Zeta Global on the opposite side of Klaviyo. Zeta Global focusing on Fortune 1000 companies, focusing on large companies, trying to sign big deals and then moving down the funnel towards smaller businesses. Klaviyo as a freemium business model. You can get started for free with them, and then they hope to move to bigger companies and sell to bigger companies. So these are the main difference between the two. They are somewhat similar. There's a lot of similarities between those two. First of all, it's all about customer data, using customer data to sell more, customer segmentation, flows, personalized marketing, driving engagement. They both have AI possibilities. They both help you to reach customers across multiple channels. They both use data to provide analytics and to get you better sales. They both have automation. They both have outcomes that they look for, like lifetime customer value, lifetime customer acquisition, etc. But they also have some difference. So like I said, and of course you feel free to have a conversation about this with your favorite AI, but some of the differences are, of course, that Zeta focuses on larger enterprises, and Zeta has an identity graph of 260 million Americans. That's kind of their moat, and it allows you to reach them. On the other hand, Klaviyo is more about creating your own customers' profiles and following your own customer profiles that the Klaviyo app will create for you. Either way, these companies, once you start using me, have usually some sort of switching costs, which makes the customer sticky. Again, you can feel free to read some of the differences, but Zeta overall seems to be a much more powerful tool, but also a much more complicated to use tool, and also a tool that's really targeted towards big enterprise. Klaviyo is using a bottom-up approach to customer acquisition. Zeta is using a top-down approach. It's funny because I compared Zeta to the Palantir of marketing. And if you followed Palantir and Snowflake, you may know that Palantir was always about starting with the big contracts first and then moving down the funnel. And Snowflake was the opposite, starting with the small players and then moving up. And I think in this sector, we've seen multiple times when starting at the top and moving down actually works somewhat better. And one of the reasons why it works better is because a lot of the features of Klaviyo, for example, again talking with an AI about this, they seem to be introduced by companies like Spotify or any of the apps where you would actually sell the product, the app that you would use to sell your products, like the Spotify or the Wix. They provide marketing services which may be 80% good enough compared to what Klaviyo provides. Klaviyo, of course, is much more comprehensive, but from what I understand, Zeta is even more comprehensive. And anyways, you can see, feel free to scroll down. I mean, these are pretty amazing tools. There's never been a better time to be a marketer, to be an entrepreneur, in my opinion. Also want to talk about, of course, Klaviyo, but also Zeta with Athena, the concept of vibe marketing, which is a concept that I've liked very much. I happen to believe that we'll have one customer, one customized ad for that customer, and it will all be AI generated. Klaviyo moving into that vibe vibe marketing field where you just talk to an AI how that you want a marketing campaign, what you want it to look, what you want the advertisement to look like, and the AI is just gonna get working for you and create these campaigns, create these ads, create the graphics, the motto, the logo, the text. It creates everything for you through AI. And so this concept is called vibe marketing. I find it quite interesting. So let's look at valuation. Of course, Zeta is actually next 12 months predicted to grow at 35%. And Klaviyo actually disappointed in their Q1 guidance, which is why the stock actually took a major dip when they reported their Q1, because they disappointed with their guidance, showing some sort of a slowdown. Also, Zeta's EBITDA margin being markedly higher than Klaviyo's margin at 15% versus 22%. Forward growth for Zeta being 35% versus 25%. So Zeta grows faster, has better margin, has a better rule of 40, and costs about the same. No matter what metric you look at, if you look at EV over forward revenue, it's roughly the same. EV over forward gross profit, Zeta is a little more expensive, but it's just a tad when you think about it, because they grow much faster, 35% versus 25%. Remember, over multiple years, this compound. And on my metric, EV over GP over RG, Zeta is actually the same price as Klaviyo, but it has a rule of 40 at 57 versus 40. So when I look at all of this, I prefer Zeta, despite the chart showing that Klaviyo appears to be a better deal, but it's not when you just look at the valuation. I also happen to believe, and Zeta does a lot of stuff, and they sit at the top of data management, marketing automation, engagement. They try to be all of this encompassing app, the Palantir of marketing, as I've called it before. But to me, what makes Zeta special and unique is the fact that they can reach 245 million in the US through their AI graph, and that they have access to individuals. And so they sell access to these individuals to companies who use Zeta, right? They follow people on the internet, and they're able to provide access to any of their customers. To me, that is a competitive advantage that you don't really find in Klaviyo, because in Klaviyo, you have to create your own profiles for your own customers, and they charge you based on how many customers you track. If you go down here and you look at their pricing, like it's all about how many you track, and I think the first 250 people that you track are free. But then the more people you follow, the more people you track, the more you have to pay. It seems to be entirely different in the way Zeta works, and Zeta, of course, I believe if you look at the rankings, they seem to be higher up and more desirable in the marketing space. I'll conclude with this because also, right, one could say, oh, they're both the same price, why not buy both? Well, the point is how many positions do you want to multiply, right? Marketing is already a specific enough business function. Do I really want to own all of the players in that specific enough business function? Maybe not, right? At some point, you got to make a choice. So some people could say, oh, I like both, but me, I want to make a choice, right? I'll conclude with this, and this is, to me, this is the deciding factor. I don't like when Klaviyo bought back their shares. They bought back their shares all the way when we were trading just above 20, sometimes under 20, around $20. They blew through 100 million of share repurchase when the stock was about $20, and they had a 500 million share purchase authorization. And I don't understand why they didn't wait. Why would they spend 100 million when the stock was trading a whole $5 higher, a whole 25%, up to 30% really higher than what it is trading today? Shouldn't they just have waited for Q1? Didn't they see the results of Q1? Didn't they have a way to see that? And I think what spooked the market in their Q1 was their guidance. Couldn't they have anticipated that their guidance would have disappointed the market, and then you launch the buyback? So it's a double-edged sword. Yeah, they have $400 million remaining in their buyback, and that's a pretty big deal, and that could lead to a short-term bounce in the price of Klaviyo. But over the long term, it may not change much if they are not growing as fast as Zeta, and if they are still associated with SaaS and CRM. I think they are suffering with their SaaS CRM association. On the other hand, Zeta also has a buyback, 138 million. And I think Zeta perhaps has been more strategic in actually allocating that money towards the buyback. So anyways, given that these stocks have the same valuation, I have to be picky, right? If Klaviyo was twice as cheap on valuation, I would prefer Klaviyo. But because of it is the same valuation, I have to be picky. And if I'm picky, I'm going to pick Zeta. So in my view, Zeta wins. Hopefully I don't disappoint my viewers who are into Klaviyo too much. Don't hesitate to tell me in the comment section what you think of Klaviyo, what I may have missed. This was not investment advice. This is not financial advice. This is only entertainment. I'm hoping you are entertained. Please like, please subscribe, follow me on Patreon, follow me on X. Thank you for watching, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.